It's the 28th of April, 2015, and this is episode 208. This show is intended for informational and educational purposes only. What cryptocurrency enables is new, empowering, and exciting, but we're not experts. Just obsessed companions walking the road towards a more peer-to-peer future. So it was about a year ago, I guess, that I switched from using Armory as my go-to wallet to using CryptoKit, basically, and then Counter Wallet for some stuff.
Probably saved about a year in booting time or loading time. Don't get me wrong, I really love Armory, but it does take a long time to scan the blockchain and do what it does to start up.
And if you had a lot of transactions back when I was using it, then you wound up having a lot of problems. Because again, for the first year, we were getting a lot of tips in, and those tips came into that Armory wallet. And so it wound up with just a ridiculous amount of transactions going into it. So yeah, I mean, that really was what kind of forced the change. And for a long time, I really liked the idea. I really liked knowing that I had the whole blockchain on my computer. And I was sure the information was right? Because web wallets, especially the early web wallets, were basically like kind of bank versions of Bitcoin wallets, except they didn't have the protections that banks sort of have forced into them.
They were not very trust-inspiring. Think of the early days of Bitcoin if you were involved back then, and pretty much every single web wallet got majorly compromised in a huge way. I remember people losing hundreds of Bitcoins in the My Bitcoin hack, or wasn't there some wallet called My Bitcoin or something like that? Blockchains had a ton of problems. I don't recommend them personally. Even the so-called trustworthy web wallets are just full of problems, and I don't blame people who are a little sketched out by them. Also, with Armory, aren't you running a full node? You're running Bitcoin D in the background, right? So that counts as a full node. You can feel good about contributing to the strength of the network, if that makes you feel good.
Again, maybe this was just a problem that I had, but I did have a problem with Armory that didn't seem to go away for a variety of ones. And so I essentially didn't use Bitcoin for 3 months. I could get the wallet to open, but I couldn't get it all the way through the process without it crashing or crashing very soon after that. And just in general, because of how many transactions I had. This was, of course, a year ago, so I assume it's improved since then. Are you still using Armory?
Yeah, I still use Armory, but I use it as a lukewarm kind of wallet. I know it's a hot wallet because it's going to be connected to the internet, but I use it less often than I do my typical hot wallets, which I like Electrum best. Honestly, it's a desktop client. I don't really use browser wallets. I just never really got into it. And I prefer Electrum because I can keep track of the transactions and stuff and keep a history and label them. And it's got a lot of features that are getting built into it. It can do multi-sig and it can do a lot of other things. They just came out with version 2. So I really like Electrum, but it's not a full node either. It's connecting to a server and getting most of the blockchain from that. That always wigged me out a little bit. So I just use it. I treat it as a hot wallet and don't keep too much in there. Armory is sort of like my medium, because it takes so long to boot. And I know what you mean about the length of time kind of deterring you from wanting to actually use it. It's oh, this is such a pain in the ass. I have to wait an hour for it to load the blockchain. I think I'll think twice about spending those Bitcoins that I was going to spend,
And actually, that was something that kind of characterized my early use of Bitcoin, was it actually did make me a lot more conservative with the things I chose to spend on, because simply there was that added friction. You mentioned web wallets, and the web wallet thing is really interesting because it has more convenience, but it also had a huge amount more risk. And I used to describe, the kind of common web wallet where, again, it's more like a bank where everybody puts in their Bitcoin and then people withdraw from a common pool. Not a good system to use. And again, what we saw blow up in Mt. Gox. You can think about that type of structure kind of like a piñata, because even if their security is good, as they get more popular, as more people use them, as more value is stored within them, well, you still only have to compromise, the one set of cold wallets or the one, hot wallet, and you've got this big giant prize.
Right.
I think the thing that I have taken away from all of this experience over the last, I guess, now 3 or 4 years working with Bitcoin is that there really are no perfect solutions, and that what you gain in one category usually comes with a sacrifice in the other.
Security is really hard. I've had most of my Bitcoin offline for a very long time, and I've used a variety of solutions for keeping Bitcoin offline. I receive Bitcoin for donations and tips into a vanity address that I access very rarely and use mostly for charitable donations. I donate the Bitcoin I receive there. And then I have long-term storage of my Bitcoin in paper wallets, simple BIP38 encrypted paper wallets, multiple copies distributed around the world. And I also have an old laptop, which is permanently offline. I've physically removed the networking interfaces. So it had a built-in Ethernet and Wi-Fi controller, and I pulled out the chips. So it can't connect to the network at all.
That's what you have to do.
Right.
I mean, that's really the level that you have to go to. I mean,
That's not for consumers, for sure. I mean, this is really extreme, but I use that for really high security transactions. So generating keys and generating paper wallets, signing transactions offline. So what I'll do is I'll either run Armory or various homegrown scripts, command line Bitcoin D, Bitcoin Core, and various other applications like that.
No, I mean, I'm just laughing because it's hard to figure out how to do that stuff. I know how to use Armory. I'm not a fool, but it's kind of involved, to generate transactions offline and sign them and stuff. It's essential if you want to use Bitcoin securely and if you're really concerned about that stuff, but it's not exactly intuitive for the average user.
It's rocket science. Right now it is. It's not easy. It really is rocket science. Although I have to say that over the last, I'd like to say 6 months, I've been using my Trezor wallet, a hardware wallet, and also a Ledger wallet, another hardware wallet. I use those for a variety of transactions, not for long-term storage or very large amounts, but as intermediate storage. So, for example, I'll have my Celium wallet on my phone with maybe half a Bitcoin, maybe a Bitcoin at most, which I use to introduce people to Bitcoin and donate to them, gift them Bitcoin to get them started and try it out. I'll have intermediate warm storage, as you mentioned, Stephanie. I use the Trezor for that, and occasionally the Ledger wallet, and I put incoming payments for services that I get paid in Bitcoin, things like that in there. And then I either move it from there. If I want to get dollars, I'll move it to, say, Coinbase and sell it, or I'll move it into a paper wallet if I want to store it long term. Essentially, it's a tiered solution. There's a really, really hot wallet, which has very little. There's the warm wallet, which has an intermediate amount. And then there's deep cold storage, where larger amounts of Bitcoin are stored.
It just reminds me, there's always this gradient of a trade-off between security and convenience. It's really hard to access that deep cold storage. It's really easy to access the hot wallet, but it's really easy for someone who you don't want to access it, potentially.
Makes you more inclined to save, however. I found that I'm a much better saver because of Bitcoin, because it's structurally harder for me to get to my cold storage. It takes more work to do that. So if I can avoid doing it, I won't. And that way, impulse buying isn't really easy with that. I think the worst slogan in Bitcoin is be your own bank. While it makes sense from you can be your own bank, and it really demonstrates the power of the technology, or desktop banking, where everyone can be a bank. The truth of the matter is most people don't want to be a bank, don't know how to be a bank, and certainly don't know how to do all of the operational security and process-based security that is needed when you're trying to be your own bank.
I agree with you. I don't like that phrase either. Like, I want to be in charge of my finances, and I want to have someone else be able to preempt my financial choices, but I don't want to do the things that a bank does, or all of the things that a bank does. No thanks. You mentioned a vanity address. Are you concerned about that at all? Because I remember some vanity address generators were basically malware that were like sending the private keys to the hacker, and then they would empty the vanity address. Have you any concerns about yours?
No, but the way I generated mine is probably not the most common way. Again, we're going back to... You
wrote your own script to do it?
No, I didn't write my own script, but I did customize some of the existing tools that are out there. So there's a open source tool called VanityGen, which you can run on your own machine. If you want to do anything more than, say, 5 characters, you either need a lot of patience, or more likely you need a GPU. Basically, any half-decent mining rig can be used for vanity generation. I've also used a vanity pool service, which does online generation of this with miners who generate vanity addresses. And the special part of this pool is that it uses elliptic curve mathematics to split both the public and private key into two parts using either multiplication or an addition operator. And what that means is that they can generate a vanity key for you without knowing what the private key is. And then you reconstruct the private key on your end, and it will produce the correct vanity address.
Interesting. Yeah, that would have to be what you do if you're going to use a pool.
And you have to pay for that, but it involves hash rates that can generate 6, 7, 8 character vanity addresses. So I use one for donations, for example, which starts with 1 Andreas. I have a few silly ones like 1 love, 1 time.
Let's get together and feel all right.
Yes, exactly. I also have an extra silly one, which is my special multisig vanity address, 3 Andreas. That's a long story.
In the mixture of security and convenience, the option that I wound up finding myself using more often than really any other wallet over the last year has probably been CryptoKit, which is a browser extension wallet from Anthony Diorio and the team over there that basically is kind of like a halfway solution between a web wallet and a physical wallet. You know, because there is this natural trade-off thing that happens between security and convenience, I wanted to talk about what the good parts and bad parts are about this type of wallet. Additionally, CryptoKit may have started this trend, but there are 2 other browser extension wallets that all have different types of value-add features in them coming out. So it seems like this might be a form factor that more people follow over time. CryptoKit, as an extension wallet, it gives your browser the ability to form transactions and gives your browser the ability, this extension gives your browser the ability to read information that's going on the blockchain. Some of the advantages that they have are they're really convenient. Like you can, you're on any sort of web page, you just click it and pop it open and you don't have to open up a different window or anything like that. And it can populate with, addresses that it finds on the page.
The way the key is generated in CryptoKit, you kind of move your mouse around in this box to generate randomness, or you can import a key if you want to that's generated somewhere else. Is that what it uses to generate key, just kind of mouse movements, if you don't input a key that you already have?
That's a pretty standard way of doing entropy, isn't it, Andreas?
Well, yes. The thing to understand is how these work, because all of these do client-side web-based Bitcoin wallets. And client-side web-based Bitcoin wallets are not very new. I think probably one of the companies that certainly pioneered this and got it very widely adopted was blockchain.info, and their wallet service is a client-side web wallet. And you can run that as either as an extension or as a JavaScript HTML page. CryptoKit is, again, I believe you can run it as both a JavaScript or as an extension. But in any case, the way they work really is the same, which is they use the browser engine to generate keys, to store the keys, and to read, manipulate, and create transactions. So the keys are generated locally, stored locally, never transmitted to the server. But in order to generate a key, you need a good source of randomness. Most browsers have some ability to generate randomness. It's actually pretty tricky to do right, and we've seen a number of software problems with implementations of either the signing signature or the key generation algorithm where they fail to do this right. So either using randomness to generate a key that's not random enough. We've seen that happen a few times with wallets that result in compromised wallets, or signing transactions without sufficient randomness. And we've seen that again with a number of wallets as a failure. Now, I'm not implying that these new ones have any of these problems. In fact, they're probably very well implemented, but that's always a source of concern with any piece of software. And what the mouse movement does is it allows you to seed the random number generator, which is a pseudo random number generator, with some entropy that is not system dependent, that is not based on the browser, but instead based on an external source. And so it will pick up minute movements of your mouse, and that will give you that extra juicing of the random number generator so that it's really, really random.
So if you don't move your mouse at all, or if you don't move it enough, then you could be generating a weaker key pair potentially?
Potentially, yes. If you don't move it at all, well, it depends which state your browser was in. Under certain circumstances, if you've just booted that machine and the machine hasn't generated enough entropy, you've just opened the browser and it hasn't generated enough entropy, it might be in a low entropy state, in which case there is a possibility that you could generate a weak key. But it's actually the implementation is more important and how well that's done.
Yeah, like with these browser wallets, even if you're, for instance, logged into Chrome as like your email, your Gmail address, if you're running CryptoKit on Chrome, you can't access your same wallet that you have on one device on a different device because it's never like synced with any server or anything like that. You have to access it on the same device because keys are actually stored locally.
Well, but the keys can be exported.
They can.
So if you want to recover it, you can essentially export it as a brain wallet and then recover it into another thing as a brain wallet, and then those will both be synchronized. But it does expose the private key, or rather the brain wallet, which then is used to derive the private key.
Let's be a bit more clear about the term brain wallet, because brain wallet has come to mean two different things. In general, brain wallet is where you initialize a key based on a sequence of words, and that was the early implementation. It's really a brain wallet if the user picks the words. Pick a phrase like Mary had a little lamb, and if you pick that one, your key is going to get hacked at about 3 seconds flat. Most users can't pick good words. What most wallets do today is called a mnemonic. It's based on the Bitcoin Improvement Proposal 39. What it does is it generates a true random number from the entropy from your mouse and everything else, and then it encodes that as 12 to 24 words from a specified dictionary. And these words are random. They're not picked by the user. So they don't form any recognizable phrase. It's unlikely you'd be able to remember them as a brain wallet, but they make it a lot easier to export and import a wallet. So that's a mnemonic phrase as opposed to a brain wallet, which is really user-generated words.
The nomenclature that CryptoKit itself uses within its export and import framework is brain wallet, but I think you would probably describe it more as a seed, because it's just like, it's clearly not a Bitcoin address, it's clearly not a private key. You know, it's essentially the seed from which that is derived. But it's not a series of words as you're describing too. I'm familiar with that. That is being used a lot more, but it's not used in CryptoKit.
Oh, interesting. And the advantage of using the BIP39 implementation mnemonic words, of course, is that to a certain extent it's interoperable across wallets. So you can take something that you export, for example, from Mycelium and import it into Bread Wallet.
Blockchain or whatever.
Yeah, so some of them are compatible to BIP39, some are not.
Today's episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin is brought to you by the LTB Companion Multi-Token Wallet. It's a Bitcoin wallet that lives in your Chrome browser that can hold 1,000 types of tokens in one simple account. If you've already installed the wallet, you should notice it's automatically updated to version 0.3.1 since the last time I updated you. Basically, this adds the LTB network directory. So now if you don't know the exact LTB username of the person you'd like to send tokens to, you can visit the Apps tab within the wallet, select the LTBN directory, and search through the membership by partial name. In the future, you'll be able to easily search for members within the directory using other types of information, like their real name, Bitcoin address on file, or email address. And remember, if you've signed up for the LTB Coin Rewards program and did not make your information private, then anyone can send Bitcoin or other assets directly to your username instead of worrying about finding your Bitcoin address. Of course, all this happens on the Bitcoin blockchain. The directory just automatically looks up and replaces your username with the recipient sending information. Last thing, If you've been listening to the show for a while now and want to get involved with any of our efforts, email adam@letstalkbitcoin.com and I'll help you find the right person and project. On an unrelated note, it's time for today's magic word. The magic word for episode 208 is wallet. That's W-A-L-L-E-T. Wallet. You've got until the 5th of May to visit letstalkbitcoin.com or the Let's Talk Bitcoin iOS app to enter it for your share of the listener rewards. And now, back to the show. So LTB community member Joe Looney is about to release a browser extension that was originally based off of CryptoKit, but he wound up just creating the whole thing from scratch. It's an open source project, and basically what it is, it's called LTB Companion. Counterwallet is the way that you can interact with Counterparty, in these types of token layers that I like to talk about. And it's the kind of de facto way to do it. But it requires you loading up a web service, essentially, that has a lot of the same issues that a web service potentially could have. It's quite slow in a lot of capacities. And so we were looking for a solution that would allow us to send and receive different types of tokens using the Counterparty protocol and essentially import that sort of functionality into a more usable format that wouldn't require people to go through Counterwallet.
Oh, I have to say, I appreciate that idea because the number one thing that holds me back from using Counterparty is just the logging in, the whole website. I don't trust it, It's having to store the phrase and everything. It's just, don't want to deal with it.
Right. The LTB Companion and Counterwallet use the same addresses. And so if you import, the 12-word phrase into the LTB Companion, then it will load your Counterwallet and it's completely compatible back and forth. And this is also true with some other applications. So yeah, the cross-compatibility really takes a lot of the security concerns, I think, off of being able to recover if a given application or service goes down that was creating your key in a proprietary fashion. The interoperability really helps, I think, to experiment a little bit more in that case. But the thing that was particularly interesting to me about all of these tools, and there's another one too I wanted to mention, called Pro Tip. Let's see, I just did an interview with Chris Ellis from Pro Tip, and I believe their actual website is my.protip.is. And basically, it is a Bitcoin wallet built into a browser application, but its particular set of functions, it tracks and collects what Bitcoin addresses and what content pages you are visiting. So if you visit Let's Talk Bitcoin, for 20% of your time on, doing entertainment stuff on the internet, then it'll tell you that at the end of a month, at the end of a week, and at the end of the week, then you can choose to send Bitcoin kind of automatically.
Based on what content you've been using the most.
Right, exactly. Based on what content you've been using the most. And it's, the whole thing is built into this really nice browser extension type package that allows it to watch what you're doing and so be able to properly, accredit the different types of people or the different groups that you want to reward without it having to be this like, okay, I want to do it right now, so I'm going to pull out my wallet right now. You just do it at the end of each week, essentially. Like looking at CryptoKit, same thing. Like it's not just a wallet like we tend to see with other things. It also has an encrypted messaging feature built in. It has some sales portal stuff, or it used to. I'm not sure if it still does. Has a Google News reader and the LTB coin thing too. You can manage any token in this wallet. It's not just for LTB coin. It's for any token built on the Counterparty network and Bitcoin. And into it, we're also building the ability to log into the website without necessarily having a username. You can use your Bitcoin public key as a username in the future with an LTB coin account. So there's this concept of value adds that are going into these Bitcoin wallet applications that really I don't think was the case, a year or two ago. Mostly wallets have seemed like they wanted to be wallets and at best maybe add a directory to it. It's not really much of a question there. I'm just like, this seems to be a trend.
I think it's really interesting to see how these wallets evolve based on the context or ecosystem of applications in which they live. A hardware wallet has unique features based on the hardware it's built on. A mobile wallet will tend to take advantage of other mobile-oriented applications, things like near-field communication, touch-to-pay, Bluetooth, GPS for geolocation and directory. A web wallet is best integrated into your overall web experience. And so that kind of wallet can take advantage of single-click payments, recognizing Bitcoin addresses and QR codes within pages in order to be able to make it easy to do one-click payments, those addresses, things like that. What we're seeing here is that the various categories of wallets behave differently and incorporate different features based on the platform that they're based on.
That is an interesting way to look at it, and that is probably true, yeah.
So maybe this goes under the heading of weaknesses, but I keep thinking back to this situation last year. I think this happened about a year ago, when suddenly Google decided to yank CryptoKit out of the Play Store. And so for a while, people who had it installed were not able to access it if they were online. If you had disconnected from the internet, your computer basically wouldn't know about it, but then you can send transactions because you're offline. So they weren't able to access CryptoKit for a while. It turned out it was some kind of issue where it wasn't Google going all Apple and blocking it from the
going all Apple
like they did with their apps, blocking Bitcoin apps from the Apple Store. Somebody had made basically a malware version of CryptoKit, and it looked a lot like the original CryptoKit, and so they yanked both of them down or something like that. And it came back within a couple of hours, but for a while, I was actually looking at CryptoKit when that happened, and I saw it basically disappear, and I was like, oh man, that's really weird that someone can just sort of yank that away from me, and then maybe it comes back later. It just felt like I wasn't in control of the situation. I know I could have exported the key, but without being able to access that particular extension, you had to go into a weird directory that I would have never found on my own if I hadn't seen a Reddit post about it, and find the key and then export it.
That Reddit post saved me too.
Yeah, you remember that? Yeah, I think it was Vitalik that posted that. So thanks, Vitalik.
Yeah, it was Vitalik.
But no thanks, Google. So those are one of the issues. I mean, I guess maybe one of the weaknesses with browser extension-based wallets is that there is a level of someone else potentially being able to influence whether you can even access your wallet. And for the average user, that's a killer because they can't figure out how to export their keys and do advanced things like that.
Well, the bottom line is key ownership and control. That is the core of the Bitcoin security model. When it comes to key ownership and control, it's a game of trade-offs. When you have a centralized custodian-based wallet, like a web wallet, like a Coinbase or any of the other services that hold funds in a shared hot wallet and disperse funds from there, then you've got your backup sorted. That's done for you, right? You don't need to worry about losing your keys. Even if you forget your password, you can recover your account. So you have easy recourse. You don't need to plan disaster recovery. What you do need to worry about, however, is that you don't have control over your keys. So now you're exposing yourself to counterparty control issues. Can they seize, freeze, or steal or have your money stolen? And we've seen that happen again and again and again with custodial accounts. Then you have client-side web wallets. There you have better control over the keys. So it's arguably, in some cases, it's harder for the company to get hacked, at least for all of the accounts to get hacked. But you don't have control over the code. So it's not that hard to substitute the code with some kind of malicious code that steals money from you. And so you're exposed to that risk, but you've also taken on all of the responsibility of disaster recovery. So unless you have sufficient backups, and we all know that most people don't do backups at all, let alone have sufficiently sophisticated backup schemes, then you run the risk of loss of funds because of loss of the keys. When it comes to browser extensions, there's a bit more control over the code. You're not served code every time you go to a page. It's part of the extension. That's controlled through digital signatures by both the code developer and, say, Google or Apple. But again, you have the issue of backup. So how do you back up the keys, and do you back up the keys? And then you have hardware wallets where, again, you have complete control over the keys. You have to be careful when doing firmware updates. And again, you have to figure out how to do some form of backup. Either you're giving up control or you're taking on responsibility. And that's a very fine balance to get right. And most people really are not very good at doing backups or maintaining the security and control over their keys. So this is the kind of double-edged sword of Bitcoin right now.
I often think about that question of I think it's a question that a lot of people think about. Obviously, there's going to need to be a range of options based on the user's level of comfort and competence with managing things like doing backups and keeping track of their keys. I guess there are starting to be a lot of custodial services and there are lots of advanced options, but I don't know if we've fully hit that range yet where there's an option out there for everyone, no matter what their level of competency, and they can easily tell which one they would feel best using, you know?
I don't think that that exists in either of the capacities that you said. There isn't a clear best option, and it's not understandable to normal people. But, to a certain extent, that's the world that we live in, and that's the part of this cycle that we're at now. We'll get there.
Do you think eventually it's going to be do you think eventually I'll just call them the dumbed down solutions, or the really easy to use solutions that put someone else in control, basically, are going to be so popular that they drown out advanced options or customized options for people who are more savvy with the technology?
I think we have hybrid options, and I think the hybrid options are where the really interesting innovation in Bitcoin is happening. You've got the power users who are able to always figure out ways to do it themselves. The really dumb custodial options have been so thoroughly discredited by thefts and hacks that people avoid them. The hybrid solutions are really interesting, and that's where we're seeing a lot of the activity. So multi-sig plus hardware wallets plus mnemonic backups, which are technologies that emerged for the first time at the end of 2013 and really blossomed in 2014. That's why I thought this was a great year for Bitcoin. That combination of secure hardware, mnemonic phrases, hierarchical deterministic wallets, and better software solutions, all of those with multisig, are really giving consumers options that begin to combine the best of all worlds. They give you enough control that you're not suffering from custodial risk or counterparty risk, but they also make backup a lot easier to execute, and we're beginning to see great solutions in that space.
It's also about the foundations. The foundations of the current banking system. When you think about sending a transfer or making a payment or something, you think about it as if it's instant. But that's only because there's a huge, huge amount of abstraction and automation that goes between you initiating the payment and somebody receiving the payment on the other end. I think that that's kind of the thing, is that the conventional banking system, the conventional finance system might have a fundamentally weaker or more limited, foundation, but it is much more developed. It exists. It has much more developed support structures that have come up around it essentially to provide the services and fill in the gaps.
Well, it's not really infrastructure. I think we have to realize that 99% of security in banking is not technological or technical in nature. It's operational in nature. It's process. And that process allows for a lot of flexibility and a lot of judgment, which means that, if I basically got stranded in the middle of America without my wallet, or even in a foreign country, without my wallet, without my phone, with no identifying documents, just me and a pair of clothes I'm wearing, I can basically get money. I can walk into a bank. I'll have to jump through hoops. They're going to have to take a photo of me. They're going to have to compare that photo to some official document. I'm going to have to sign some papers. But within 24 hours or so, I can reestablish control over sources of money that are not even in the same country. That's provided by operational flexibility. It's not technical. Bitcoin has much better technology, but it hasn't yet developed any of the operational processes. And I think what we're going to see is, as we develop these operational processes around security with the superior technology, we're going to get even better results.
One of the last things I want to hit on this topic before we move on is the open source question, right? Because there's kind of this common understanding that open source is a better way to go when it comes to developing wallet applications, because it allows for auditing of the code and to make sure that you're doing it right and all that stuff, and interoperability and other things too. But one of the things that it leaves open, right? If you're closed source, then it's actually kind of difficult for someone to copy and to release a malicious version of your software. But if you're open source, then it seems like the barrier to doing that and to having that sort of situation where, yeah, sure, you have your good one out there, but also somebody has come along and there are a couple of ones that, report back private keys or something. Open source and transparency in general, when it comes to something like code, seems like it's a double-edged sword.
I don't really see it as a double-edged sword. If weaknesses exist in code, whether the source is available or not, eventually determined people are going to reverse engineer and find them. The advantage with open source is that you're more likely that that's going to be discovered by members of the community who are wearing white hats and who will do responsible disclosure rather than exploiting those weaknesses. And it's a lot harder to sneak in backdoors and for public auditing of the software. Now, that doesn't make it foolproof. I mean, we've seen repeatedly that open source software, even when very widely deployed, very highly scrutinized, can have long-lasting, insidious bugs that just sit there for years without anybody noticing. The most recent examples, of course, being things like Heartbleed and various other OpenSSL bugs that have surfaced over the last several years. And we see that with Linux, with Android, with Apache, with OpenSSL, and many other projects. But that doesn't mean that open source is weaker because, arguably these bugs did surface and got fixed. And with proprietary and closed source software, you never know if bugs are there, but known only to a very few select group of malicious attackers who are going to use them against you.
I don't disagree with anything that you've said, but the point that I'm trying to make is that if your source is publicly auditable and someone can take and deploy their own copy of it, then someone can take and deploy their own copy with slightly different branding that is malicious and that offers all the functionality supposedly of yours, seems to indeed do it, but has this one, couple of lines changed so that whenever, you make a transaction, it sends your private key to a server controlled by some malicious entity. That's not really about bugs. That's about the availability of code and how easy it is to replicate code. So that's something I would argue.
Yeah, but open source doesn't really enable that. You can do that. You can re-engineer, wrap, or encapsulate proprietary closed source code quite easily. If I can execute it, I can put it in a sandbox, execute a wrapper around it, and intercept everything that goes in and out of that application, whether it's closed or open source.
Okay, so this is it's not a different risk.
It's not a different risk. It's the exact same risk. The risk is that all software is forever trying to figure out if it's living in the matrix or not. Software can't tell if it's taken the red pill or the blue pill. As far as software is concerned, its execution environment is the only environment it knows. And if that execution environment is being simulated inside a virtual machine, inside a sandbox, inside an attacker's machine, software can never know if it's running on bare hardware, if it's interacting directly with a user, or if it's in a completely simulated environment where everything it sees as inputs and everything it sends as outputs is mediated by a malicious layer around it. That's a fundamental weakness of software. It has nothing to do with whether it's open or closed source.
Okay, so just to wrap this up, one of the other, I think, newer trends even than these extension wallets is the idea of sort of like applications like Lighthouse or the upcoming BitSquare that are essentially Bitcoin wallets, but that have kind of limited wallet functionality and more specific functionality built around them. So in the case of Lighthouse, it's a Bitcoin wallet that allows you to participate in crowdfunding efforts. And so you can't make a transaction and send, 0.1 Bitcoin to someone else's address because that's not the purpose of the wallet. You can pledge that much, but it doesn't perform the transactions in the same way. So, from a security standpoint, from a usability standpoint, from a, is this a good direction to go in? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're using it for, but of course it's better to have more options. And some of these new applications seem like they'll be solving some problems that I currently see in the Bitcoin world. Right on.
I think they're great. I mean, what these types of wallets are demonstrating is something that I've argued from the very beginning. Bitcoin is not a currency. Currency is just the first app. Bitcoin is a platform, the internet of money. And people are now beginning to build other apps on top of the Bitcoin platform. And that's a fantastic result.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Let's Talk Bitcoin. Content for today's episode was provided by Stephanie, Andreas, and Adam. Music for this episode was provided by Jared Rubens, Nathaniel Castro, and General Fuzz. This episode was edited by Adam B. Levine. Any questions or comments? Email Adam at letstalkbitcoin.com. And just as a final note, someone reached out the other day asking what copyright scheme we released the show under. And I just want to be clear, this is released under Creative Commons 3.0 Attribution and Share Alike. So you're free to clip, remix, reuse. The only thing that you have to do is just link back to the original content creator, which would be Let's Talk Bitcoin over here. and release the content that you create from our content and other people's content under a similar licensing scheme that also reflects the attribution and share-alike characteristics. So it's not nothing, but, there's no licensing fees, there's no need to contact us, there's really no need to do anything outside of just make sure that you cite the people whose work you're using.